And at one point I heard a quote from James Baldwin that racism is actually not a people of color problem. It's a white person problem. And it's not going to change unless white people do something about it. And
I'm doing my own work to look at what are the racist attitudes I still have, racist behaviors I'm doing. I'm showing up and saying, look what I did just yesterday. I could tell you the stories if you want. And we're holding each other accountable, not just to study and knowledge. All right, that might be useful, but it's no longer enough. It's what are our white supremacist attitudes and behaviors that we are doing and relating in, not judging, holding each other accountable for change. It's not just navel gazing, it is change. And so that's what we're doing. So white racial justice work, anti-racist work is self-work, in my opinion. We have to do that or we whites will replicate the status quo that Ted was talking about in that default, as you're saying, we will replicate it. And so much to do. Don't jump into urgency uninformed, but informed, collaborative urgency, action now, conversations more.
White people talking about racism is something that I love to see. You know, when I see a group of white people discussing about racism, I love that. But the question is, do you really understand? Do you really understand? Because you can acknowledge racism exists, but you don't understand how it is. Thing that black people need to do so that we as black people see that you are acknowledging it is to understand the impact of slavery and racism. No, you can talk about racism. You can as a white person, but have you really understood? Because you need to understand the feelings. You need to put yourself in the shoes of black people and feel the racism, because you as a white person, you don't come across racism as, you know, in your daily, you don't come across racism. You just hear maybe a black person complaining, or maybe you have a friend who is racist, or you have a parent who is racist. So you don't actually feel how it is. You don't actually feel the heaviness in the heart of this black person. So you need to understand the impact of slavery first, and you go acknowledging or talk about it. Of course, talking about slavery or talking about racism in the white people is good, because that shows that you are in the right way, or you are in a way of apologizing to the black fraternity. Now, the video I'm going to share today is a conversation of white people talking about racism, something that a lot of white people fear talking about, because they fear talking about, you know, or they resist talking about racism, slavery, colonization, because it is uncomfortable to them. However, honest conversation are necessary. So I want you to watch this video and comment down there if it's a honest conversation. But I love what I see, and maybe this is the way to go. We have a lot of things to do as white people. Support reparation, acknowledging, understanding, you know, holding accountables of institutions. So as you are watching this video, I want you to comment down there if you think it's a honest conversation about racism discussed by these white brothers and sisters. Let's dive into the videos and then we'll come back again and talk something about it.
And my first question for our panel is personal. As a white person, what are some of the ways you personally work at being anti-racist?
I'm happy to jump into that question, but since I went first the first time, I don't want to keep doing it. I have a couple ideas here. Obviously, the first thing that what I love about this question is that it's about the personal work of being anti-racist. And I like to think of it not as work, but as a practice, just like you might have a meditation practice. If you know how to meditate, great. But unless you do it on a regular basis, not much happens as a result of it. And so I try to break this down into three ways, the same ways that we talk about multicultural competencies in psychology, that an anti-racist practice for me includes knowledge, skills, and self-awareness. And the knowledge is really learning the actual history of the United States, the way that racism has been built into our systems, the way that Ted mentioned, and looking at films like watching films like 13th or When They See Us, and starting to learn, take on new knowledge. The self-awareness piece is about recognizing your own bias, but also recognizing your own emotional response to the new knowledge you're taking in. Because as you take in new knowledge, the sand that you stand on starts to shift, and you realize, wow, I actually built my whole identity on the assumption of this history. And now I'm learning that history that I learned in school actually wasn't accurate. So it's also about developing a new sense of self and a new sense of awareness as a result of that knowledge. And then there are skills. And so I'm just gonna share 3 skills. I think there's a lot more. One for me is about feeling about racism. As white people, we tend to think about racism more than we feel about it. And if we were guided by our feelings, we would take different action. I've only learned about racism really through books and through, from what people tell me, but racism doesn't show up at my door every morning. I don't have to think, how am I going to talk about this with my kids or my friends or my parents? How am I going to navigate this thing? Because I wake up, there's no, as far as I can tell, it's not targeting me. And so one of the skills is really starting to get that visceral connection to racism that people of color have. And one of the ways I do that is by not scrolling through the headlines, but reading one story deeply, getting to know that person or that story, and connecting to it emotionally. 2 more skills. A second one is developing a supportive network of white people who are going to push me to be anti-racist, who are going to support me and challenge me, who will hold me on that journey of developing a new sense of self, but who also aren't going, when I have friends who say, oh, Allie, you're not racist. Don't worry about it. That thing you said you did, don't worry about it. You're fine. Those are not my allies. They might be my friends, but my allies are going to say, oh, wow, you did that. I'm sorry you did that. I've done that too. But listen, how could you do it differently? Let's brainstorm. Let's think about it together. So develop a supportive network of white allies who are going to help you do better and be better. And then the third one is to just seek and listen to feedback from people of color.
To hop on to build on both of what you all are saying, because I so agree. And I believe it was Sue and Sue that added a 4th competency, which is action. And here's what I think is happening today, because I so relate in my history. Get a little more information. I'm seeing many more white people waking up and wanting to read. And we jump from a little bit of knowledge to action. And here's my fear. So what do I do in anti-racism work? Is I help white people not jump from, oh, I know more, so now let's go in as the white savior out of white supremacist attitude that I know more in what I believe. What I know, arrogant, I'm smarter, I'm better. Those are the white supremacist attitudes that I continue to react out of. And so I create white accountability groups as well as work with senior white leaders. That's how I do anti-racism work. And 2 days after George Floyd was murdered by police, Rachel Forrester gave me a call, a white woman, alumni of the Social Justice Training Institute, and said, I want to start something. Do you want to do it? And I felt fear. I'm like, I've never done anything live, national Zoom. And 2 days later, we did our first Zoom white accountability space. Stepping up, moving out, not having to be perfect, in collaboration, accountability. But in those spaces, I'm doing my own work to look at what are the racist attitudes I still have, racist behaviors I'm doing. I'm showing up and saying, look what I did just yesterday. I could tell you the stories if you want. And we're holding each other accountable, not just to study and knowledge. All right, that might be useful, but it's no longer enough. It's what are our white supremacist attitudes and behaviors that we are doing and relating in, not judging, holding each other accountable for change. It's not just navel gazing, it is change. And so that's what we're doing Tuesdays and Fridays every day, plus convening on Wednesdays if you want to learn how to understand how I hold with other folks. So white racial justice work, anti-racist work is self-work, in my opinion. We have to do that, or we whites will replicate the status quo that Ted was talking about in that default, as you're saying, we will replicate it. And so much to do. Don't jump into urgency uninformed, but informed, collaborative urgency, action now, conversations, more studying data, no longer another statement, no. I'll stop there. We have to move to collaborative action, especially as white people, because we have burdened and we have set up people of color to be fired because we have chosen cowardice and to hold on to our white privilege and white supremacy.
Yeah, I so agree with what Kathy is saying about this work being self-work. And I would just add the idea that any kind of self-work is hard.
Yeah.
And that this is hard. And that as we're all trying to do this kind of work, we also have to be our own best friends sometimes. And it's like when we're born, I think as white people in this country, we're given a keyboard to type on, a computer keyboard, and all the keys are set, and we learn how to communicate on this white keyboard all of our lives. And this is what we know, and this is how we write, and we get fluent and articulate. And then as your eyes begin to open and you become more self-aware of yourself and the world around you, you're trying to change the keyboard, or the keyboard is being switched on you. And now you have to learn to, type all over again. And the keys aren't where they used to be anymore. And sometimes that's confusing, and we stumble and we fall. So I think in all of this, there's this kind of good, bad, binary thinking that can happen, that if as a white person in this country, I am bad, and I just want to also just float the idea to help yourself and be your friend in this process.
I'd like to briefly add some things, and I'm going to go back to something that Stephen said in the introductions, and this notion of reaching in more than reaching out. And for me, and I'm always learning, still learning, but reflection is a really important practice for me. Deeply understanding like who I am, who I'm going to be. How is it that I became president, or how is it that I accessed college, higher education? What are the privileges and opportunities that were presented to me? And how did those differ from others' experiences? So thinking about how are my words and actions showing up? Are they helping to dismantle racism, or are they contributing to it? So these are really hard, honest questions that I need to ask. And as someone who has the privilege of working in teams at our college, a team of 1,500 employees, full and part-time, I understand that I'm in a position to be observed. And so as I continue to do the best that I can to work hard to understand myself, I want to create a climate where more and more of my colleagues are comfortable being uncomfortable, as was said earlier, so that we can more intentionally open up conversation and examine, yes, ourselves, but also this Fullerton College experience we're creating every day for our students, from our procedures, our policies, our systems, so we can have a deep look at how that shows up for our students, our Black students, all of our students, and have deeper conversations. But I think for me, it goes back to reflection as a practice is really, really important for all of us.
Thanks, Greg, and everyone for contributing. Can you all tell us about a time you either contradicted or failed to live up to your anti-racist values?
I just want to say first that this is a great question, because this is how I believe we need to show up as white people, is owning racist attitudes, behaviors, white supremacy attitudes, relating in without shame, blame. So L2I Cross Associates let me in to be a part of their firm. After a few years, I was tapped to become one of 5 that maybe moved into leadership. We're out of 50 people, cross race, and this is an organization that does dismantling, ameliorating racism, sexism, heterosexism. I have a group of 5 people I'm planning with to do this activity. Night before we're supposed to get up in this 5-day training to do this, my coach assigned to me several layers up the organization, Black man, comes up and says, Kathy, I need to speak with you. I put my hand up and I said, Kurt, just a minute, we're not done. Next day, I am holding the space to my people that are out doing stuff. I know we're at time, but I decide we can go over because there's so much more we have to do. Black woman who is in charge of the entire process stands up. I know she means you're over time. I ignored her authority, her leadership, disrespected her. And I thought, I'm just going to keep going. I got very clear feedback about how my internalized dominance, racism, believing I'm smarter, better, deserve to do whatever I want, disregard publicly twice to leaders of color. I wish that was the only story I had, but here's what I know. If that had been the white heterosexual female person was my sponsor, mentor in that group. If she had been the one in charge, as soon as she stood up, I would have stopped. That's how I know I'm acting out of racism, and I could keep going. But I'm embarrassed by that story, and it's so powerful to remind myself, because I still think I'm smarter, better, and discount the input of particularly my Black colleagues and all folk of color at times. Internalized white supremacy.
Thanks, Kathy.
I run a theater company in Los Angeles. I'm the artistic director there, and I think our theater is committed to diversity and inclusion. And I was producing a play that dealt with police brutality, and it was written by a Black playwright. It was directed by a Black director. We have, of course, Black actors in the cast. And I was talking about promoting this play about police brutality, and I wanted to use an image in a promotional video of the body of a Black man who had been shot and killed by police recently. It was a police shooting, and there was an image that was in the newspaper. This was a couple of years ago, by the way. This is not just recently. This was a couple of years ago that this happened. And so I had this brilliant idea that I wanted to use this image to promote this play about police brutality, this image of a Black man lying dead in a gasoline station, because I thought it was provocative and would drive the issue home. So I showed it to the director of the play, and she said, no, I don't want to use that image. And it's disturbing and wrong. And I, of course, began to say, well, that's the point. I'm coming from goodness. We don't want to look away from this. We want to see it for what it really is. And she said to me, I'll never forget, she said, that man is somebody's father. That Black body is somebody's son. And it made me realize, and I realize now, that I wasn't looking at it that way. I was looking at that Black body as an image, as an object, and not as a human being. I'd forgotten about the human being. And it was an important lesson for me to learn, and one I've never forgotten.
I've got a couple of thoughts on this one. The first is silence. And just talking openly with white colleagues about what it is about silence. And it's often what we're present to is these ideas about fear of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, trying to operate from a place of integrity, but just not wanting to mess up. And the thing is that as I continue to learn, it's okay to mess up. Most of our colleagues expect that we're going to mess up. We're human. To be vulnerable and to be willing to take risks, always from a respectful approach, is something that I'm learning to be more comfortable. And my colleagues that I work with, we're working on being more comfortable with that. And then a second one, though, would be rushing to speak. And I'm honest talk, right, with a few of our best friends here. I'm really guilty of this. I think it's because I think that I was appointed the president of Fullerton College, and I've got a responsibility to lead. And sometimes that'll take the form of I want to do what's right as a college. I'm a part of our college, right? And rushing to speak, being motivated to define and achieve action. And this was shared earlier. I think it's a really, really good point, is really taking a pause and having the benefit of the rich community around us to help us inform maybe the potential action we can take next, and resisting that urge to act quickly out of a desire to be responsive and to help. But many times, and I've been reminded of this a long time ago and recently, it can be best to, in those situations, to listen very actively first, and minimize the risk that or accidentally shutting someone down without realizing it. So that's a big one for me, just to be honest. And I'm really trying hard to be better at that, and to support my colleagues that I work with.
Yeah, we need to learn how to rush to listen, don't we?
Yeah. I really appreciate this conversation because I feel like I resonate with everything people are saying, and we don't all live in the same places or even know each other, but it just speaks to our socialization as white people that we have stories that resonate so much. For me, I remember being in a group, a small multiracial group at a conference, and we were together every day for 5 days. And throughout the course of the week, I had an Asian American colleague who kept trying to tell me something. She clearly didn't like the way I was doing something or saying something, and I just kept kind of not hearing it. And at the end of the week, I just said to her, look, do you know how many books I've read on this topic? And she said to me, are you kidding me? If you had actually read that many books, you wouldn't have just said that to me. And in the moment when she said that, I just thought, oh my God, she's right. Of course. Like, why would my going to grad school mean I know more about racism than a 40-year-old woman of color who's lived her whole life as a person of color? But, sometimes I joke that this bookshelf behind me is like a monument to my insecurities, that I want people to know I've read books and that I have, I have some intelligence.
Look at John.
Yeah.
And it's like my insecurities, they come from my role in my family. They don't come necessarily from racial dynamics, but they manifest in my relationships with people of color when I'm feeling insecure. Another time I was taking feedback from a person of color that I had asked for, and it just crushed me, and it was offered very kindly. But in describing it later, I described it as she attacked me. And it was actually Kathy O'Bear who challenged me. She was like, did she really attack you? Did it get physical? And I was like, well, no, physical. She's like, where were you? Were you in a parking lot? No, it was kind of like this wine and cheese affair. Nobody even actually raised their voice, And like, as I thought, I was like, she didn't attack me. I asked her for feedback. She gave it to me. But then I didn't talk to her. This was another person in my grad school program. I didn't talk to her for 2 years after that because I just felt so dumb and so inadequate. And really what she wanted was to be able to give me feedback and for me to be able to move on. And so that's kind of where I can continue to find my work, is like being able to fall down and pick myself up again and keep going, knowing that I know more today than I did yesterday before I got that feedback. I think the one other thing I'd add, if I can, is that all of these stories for me come out of a sense of internalized superiority. We often talk about internalized oppression and how it silences people from oppressed groups, but we don't talk about the flip side, which is a sense of internalized superiority, that my voice should be heard, that I should show up and be listened to. And what has happened to me in some relationships with colleagues of color is that they've been able to say, right now in this conversation, I can't even figure out what I think, because your internalized superiority is so big and my internalized oppression is so big.
It's so big.
And even though neither of us is consciously trying to do that, it's in the interaction where you're not able to collaborate because those forces are acting so big. And that's, so when Greg talks about, taking up like space and being quiet, it's not just because like performatively, or not that that's what Greg was saying, not just that's what I need to do, is that it's like, is that I'm enacting racial dynamics that were built before I was born that I don't even recognize are there. And so the stepping back and taking up less space is also about saying to those racial dynamics, you are not going to control this situation. We are going to take a hold and make sure that both of our voices are heard. And we're going to figure out how we have to do that interpersonally.
Ollie, I have a question.
Hey, John, can I add? No, good. You go, Steve.
I just have a question for you, Ollie, and for the panel here. You're also so smart, and I'm because you use the phrase "person of color," and we use that phrase so much, a person of color, and it's a real question to me. Isn't that phrase racist in some way? Does calling someone a person of color, does that not denote an otherness? I mean, white is a color, and does it not
Allie?
denote a kind of us and them-ness that I'm just wondering if there is a better phrase, or does anyone else have any feelings about that?
I certainly share your discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
I just said I share Stephen's discomfort with that.
I think for me, what I've learned, and I think racial terms are changing every decade. They change because they're imperfect and they're all based on a social construction to begin with. So, I think all of these terms are imperfect. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah.
What I've learned, people used to talk about white people and non-white people, which meant that you were defining all people of color in terms of something that they don't have rather than who they are. Some people today will talk about people of color and indigenous people, because indigenous people don't necessarily identify as people of color or as a racial group. But I think there are lots of different ways you could do. People of color is meant to be expansive, to include Black people, this, Latinx people, Asian American people, people who are multiracial or transracially adopted.
I know.
But I think you're right. I mean, I think what we're trying to do here with racial terminology is define a landscape that has been built by racism. And so anti-racism is trying to basically back ourselves out of 500 years of history by talking about the very things by talking in anti-racist ways, but we're still using terminology that is in some ways shaped by racism.
Right. Yeah, well, I think we want to the point where we're not defining people by color at all. Right.
Actually, we're seeing color. Someone asked earlier, should I be colorblind or not? Actually, it's not color, it's oppression. We're seeing the whites in dominance and privilege and white supremacy power, and folk of color, multiracial, biracial, indigenous folks have been marginalized and oppressed. So I actually think these terms recognize, as someone put in the chat, it's the oppressive systems, the systemic racism, colonization, and I've heard I follow the leadership of folk of color when I'm paying attention. I've seen the term BIPOC, B-I-P-O-C. Yeah. And apparently in the New York Times, someone said it was started a few years ago, Black indigenous people of color. And so I am using terms that I hear my colleagues of color who are doing dismantling racism, racial justice, liberation work. And your question in the chat, like 10 people said, great question. So we do have to have that space around knowledge and why. And my fear is, as white people show up, we start spinning in terminology. And I know, see, that's not what you're doing, but many white folks do. And what's the right way, wrong way, as opposed to let's look at the oppression and how it's happening in our organization and how it's happening in me, how I'm perpetuating it, and what I can do as a white person to deepen my capacity to partner with folks of color, follow the leadership of folk of color, indigenous folks to create racial justice. So it's small part of a much larger capacity building that today we have to leap into, in my opinion.
Come back. White people talking about racism to other white people or white people talking to other white people about racism is important for dismantling systematic racism and promoting equity. Now, as I started earlier, I said that I love to see white people discussing about racism to other white people, educating themselves. So I believe the people or the white people who are discussing this racism, they have already understood it and they know how, they feel, they have put themselves in the shoes of the Black people, and because you cannot teach or talk what you don't know. That is mocking. But I don't know if you have watched this video, you have your judgment. But white people discussion should be acknowledging racism exists, acknowledging that racism exists and is systematic, because many white people think racism is just about individual prejudice or hateful acts. However, racism is built into illegal economic and social systems. For example, housing discrimination. Housing discrimination kept Black families from building wealth. So Black people does not have generational wealth simply because of racism and discrimination. We have something that's called unequal sentencing laws in the justice system. So when you talk about housing discrimination, someone who is in the United States of America, I think for you to own a house is very important. For you to create a generational wealth, you need to have house, you need to have maybe businesses and, but the system denied black people to own these things. The system denied black people to get better wage payment. The system denied black people to put up their businesses. The system denied black people to own businesses. The system denied black people to get maybe loans. The education in the black community is so expensive. The health care is so expensive. So, and all this is about racism. Denying black people some rights and giving it to white people is about racism. So white people should know this. I know you don't feel this, but right now I'm happy that, I'm happy that some white people are feeling the pinch of what black people have been feeling all along. So yeah, they are feeling the pinch. So I think some of them are understanding how black people have been suffering. We have something we call employment discrimination, and this means that white candidates are often given first priority, but black candidates are suffering. They don't get jobs. So this is a continuation, or just make to continue. Wealth gap is still existing and continuing. The gap is getting, because if you don't have employment, if you don't get job, if you are paid badly, can't do something. Another thing I may talk, white people talking to white people about racism is good. I love that. I have to talk to them to challenge the idea that being not racist is enough, because some people, white people, just say, okay, I'm not racist, it's enough. But it is more than that, because some white people just say, I'm not racist, as if, however, racism continues because people allow it to persist through silence and inaction. Now, being anti-racist means actively challenging racism policies or racist policies, behaviors, and benefit. Example, if our friends make a racist joke, remaining silent allows it to continue. When you are saying that I'm not racist, it is him. No, you need to speak up. As a white person, speak to your white friend. Talk about white privilege without guilty, because white privilege, it's, the white people are living under white privilege. So white privilege does not mean that white people don't struggle. It means that they don't face additional obstacles while facing life. They don't face a lot of challenges while facing life. A white person is less likely to be stopped by police based on racial suspicion. A white person, their names on job application are less likely to lead to discrimination. A white person, they don't have fear that negative actions on one white will reflect on all white people. It's like black people mistake, one black person mistake is a mistake of everyone. So they need to talk about the white privilege without not feeling guilty, because you need to understand you are living with a white privilege. The video, I'm talking in a very low tone. I'm humble. I don't know, because the video I've just saw, at least, it softened my heart regarding to racism issues and discrimination, to see white people sitting down and discussing. We have two types. There's these white people who are genuinely want to ending racism and discussing about it, who are genuinely doing it from the heart. And there is set of another white people who are doing it just because they wanna, they want people to see them as they are doing something for the black people. So I don't know. If you're a white person and you are talking about racism, fellow white people, and you are genuine about it, that's all black people want. Because if you are genuinely talking about it, that means you will address the bias in the community. You will address the equality. You will address the impact that your whiteness play in your country. If you are genuine, you will not feel guilty. If you are genuine, you will accept or acknowledge that the importance of black people in your country. So we'll fight for fair wages. Not just talking here, but when it comes to fair wages is where you draw the line, you step back. You may be talking here on social media, but when it comes to health unfairness, you keep quiet. When it comes to police brutality, you keep quiet. So other than social media, or you must act. Action is where we will know that white people are generally asking for forgiveness. I know not all of white people will ask for forgiveness. I've come across videos where white people say we do not have to forgive what our ancestors did, but some of them are truly genuine because they are encouraging people to listen to the people of color, or listening to the people of color. They're encouraging them to read books and articles, just to know about black people, know the history, know their past, feel them, acknowledge, talk about them, support reparation. When they are fighting the battle, help them fighting the battle, because we are all one. Now, white people will talk to other white people about racism, because maybe your fellow white people may be more willing to listen than to their peers, because I see videos where white people or black people talk about racism, but not all white people will listen to them. But if you are white, you talk about racism, maybe some white people will be able to listen to you. So that is the path of apology and everything. So personally, my personal opinion, more than your comment, I think it was a good conversation. I've listened to all of it, and I think it's good conversation. I don't know if I can sense an honesty, but talking is not enough. Acting, supporting, calling out your government, a lot of white people knows they are living off the black people back. Yeah, a lot of white people know they are enjoying the fruits of the black people. Maybe you may find a company and you may find the good jobs are given to white people who are not qualified, but the jobs that are not that good given to people of this other color or people of color, and the wage is not that big. They know that. So if you talk about these things, you need to talk about everything that is affecting you direct. But I know it's hard. It is hard to take yourself to police station and tell police, my father wronged, so I'm here to return this land to this guy. It's very hard. See what's happening in South Africa. The white people in South Africa knows very well that, this land is not ours. Our ancestors took it forcefully. They took it. So the government is trying to retract or to appropriate the land, take it to the rightful owner. See what's happening. They are complaining because, yes, the white in South Africa are talking about racism. Most of them, they are against it. But when it comes to return what you took, that's where we draw the line. And that means that you have not understood what it means. You have not understood what you're trying to defend. Because when you understand what you're trying to fight for, you understand the repercussion. Okay? What you understand that if you understand that racism is bad, slavery is bad, and you are decided to talk about it, you understand that there will come a time they will tell you, okay, now you are talking about it. Can you bring back what belonged to us? And it'll be like, yeah, of course, you have got profit. Get your profit now. Yeah, I'll give it back without bad blood. That is good. That's what we need. And I did an episode here talking about, there was an Asian lady who went for black people saying that they should stop, white people should stop apologizing, blah, blah, blah. If you haven't seen the video, here it is. Now, the first comment I saw, it was this one. Someone said this: white people need to acknowledge their wrongs and make amends. You hear that? Someone said, I don't want an apology, I want freedom. I live in San Francisco, area of California, USA. This is where there are communities of some Asian Americans that voted politically and apply jobs as white. You have to choose your ethnicity, okay? So they choose as white. And blacks and Africans are looked down upon, whatever reason. Hear that? So as far as you are talking about it, when you are going to apply for a job, are you ready to give a black person a chance because he deserves it? Or you will racially discriminate him or her? Are you ready for that? And if you're ready for that, then we are going good with the discussion. The discussion started long way back. our ancestors. And right now, I was born, when I started knowing things, going to school, I studied about racism, slavery. Now I'm old enough, I can talk about it. It is still there. I still hear black people complaining. I still see it here in Africa, how we worship white people, because it is systematic racism. It automatically, and you accept the glory as a white person, like, oh, hail black people. That's bad. You need to tell us, oh, okay, I'm not Jesus. We ain't. No, we ain't white. Jesus ain't white. You need to accept that. As a white person, when praises comes to you on your side, you need to say, oh, no, I'm just as you. Hey, don't just absorb the glory and feel like you are, You need to be truthful when you decide to talk about these issues that is affecting races. I know maybe it is very hard to end racism, but we can fight as a community. As an individual, we may talk, but when you go back door, you still practice racism. But as an entity, as a whole white race, when you talk about it, when you do actions in employment sectors, healthcare sectors, education sectors, when you talk about it, when you are there, and it is better to start that way. And if you are an individual, start by talking to your family members, because all of us white people have maybe one or two family members who really racist. All of us black people, we have family members who just worship white people like, yo. I have a family member, by the way, who worship white people like. So we need to start from where we are. Yeah. And don't take it to advantage that when you are supporting black institutions, you are doing favor. It's not favor. Yeah, ain't favor at all. It's just because you cannot repay what your ancestors did by just snap of an hand or by donating. No. It is trying to soothe the heart of black people. At least black people will say, oh, hell, they're trying, So, of course, forgiven. Yeah. I think we have a lot to talk about racism, and I have a lot to learn too. And I will wish you to teach me one or two if you know some things on the comment section, description. I have my number there. Okay? Until next episode, peace out.